Let's get it. Welcome back to another edition of the Hampton Show. Joel, how are we doing today?
I'm not doing too well. I still have some faith in my New York Knicks, but we have to take it one game at a time. But outside of that, I'm doing great.
Love it. Today, we have a jam-packed episode. We are revealing a perfect trade for every NBA team this summer. We're discussing LaMelo's comments on potentially leaving the Hornets. But first, let's start with previewing the potential NBA Finals. We're recording this on Thursday, but even if the Knicks win tonight against the Indiana Pacers are one win away from the NBA Finals. The Thunder are already there. So, Joel, let's preview the NBA Finals. Indiana was 9-14 on December 1st of this season. Since January 1st, we've talked about this ad nauseum. They're 45-17, including the playoffs. To me, bro, it's just insane that they're even in this position. But this is going to be a lot closer series with the Thunder than I think everybody is going to give it credit for, because these two teams have one massive thing in common. They do not turn the ball over at all. If you look at the stats starting at the calendar year of 2025, they are number 1 and number 2 in lowest turnover percentage. If you look at the playoff stats, they're still number 1 and number 2 in lowest turnover percentage. We know that OKC and Indiana thrives off points off turnovers. I think that is the one thing that decides this series. Joel, I want to know your early lean for this. I want to know your prediction for this, and then I'll predict the series as well.
I'm going with OKC in 5. I think that the Denver series spooked me when it came to OKC because it went all the way to 7, and then they ended up beating Minnesota in 5 games. The growth that I've seen from Chet, from J-Dub in the conference finals, what they did, J-Dub 22, 6, and 5 on 44% from 3 shooting. He shot efficiently from the field as well. He was clutch in those moments. Chet, what he's done on both sides of the ball, he is finishing everything around the rim, and his impact defensively, he is deterring shots around the rim. I don't think the Pacers are going to have an answer for Shea, J-Dub, or Chet. And this growth and maturation that we've seen from OKC, with Shea playing at an MVP level, which he's been doing that all season long consistently, my biggest questions were J-Dub and Chet. Will they be inconsistent or will they be consistent performers? The conference finals, they were consistent performers. And I feel as if that Denver Game 7 was a graduation period for this young OKC team where everything was put together. J-Dub had a phenomenal game. He really showed out, and he's becoming more of that Robin to Shea's Batman. And when I look at this series, I think it's going to be a great stylistic matchup. I think the Pacers are the best offense remaining that is equipped to handle OKC's defense. But with all that being said, Indiana's defense has not been good this entire playoffs. It's been all right. I don't think it's been anything special. They have allowed big scoring nights and number 1 options, whether that's Giannis, Donovan Mitchell, or Jaylen Brunson. And now they're going up against the MVP. I don't see any world where Shea doesn't get his own, doesn't get his shots up and scores 30 plus in this series efficiently. And then who's going to be the other defender on J-Dub? Who's going to guard Chet? And these defenders, the Pacers turned the ball over at a very low amount, but they played the Bucks defense, which has been a bad defense. They played the Cavs defense, which they had no perimeter defenders. They played the Knicks.
Stop. You can't just gloss over Cleveland's defense. That was one of the best defenses in the league all year long.
Since January 1st, they were 15th in defensive rating, and you had Garland out there on a hobbled ankle, and Mitchell, who's a smaller guard.
Defensive player of the year was out there, bro.
Evan Mobley, yeah, he's a great defender, but overall that defense collapsed in the second half of the year. That's not OKC. New York, they have 2 liabilities on defense with Brunson and Cat. With OKC, the amount of bodies they could throw at Indiana, a team that thrives off of mismatch hunting, there is not a mismatch that you can hunt on OKC. And I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle for them. But I won't put anything past Rick Carlisle because his offensive plays and his system is one of one, and he's able to design players open. So if the Pacers can maintain their hot shooting, I think they have a puncher's chance. But I think what this season ultimately is one of the best guard seasons in the history of the NBA, with Shea being an MVP, a first-teamer, an all-star, a conference finals MVP, and capping it off with a Finals MVP, an NBA championship, and cementing himself as the greatest OKC Thunder ever after this season.
Look, I'm not going to sit here and argue that the Thunder aren't going to win this series, but I am going to argue that it's not going to be 5 games. I agree. The Thunder did have a graduation in that game 7 of the Denver series, but I did watch OKC struggle to score at points in that series. I'm not saying Indiana has some defensive stalwart defense, but Denver did not have some defensive stalwart defense either. I think where OKC is going to get in trouble in pockets of this series is trying to keep up with the Indiana Pacers offense. The Thunder are going to play the exact same stylistic fight that the Pacers want to play. And I think that is more than enough to steal 2 games in this series. OKC has had the only real home court advantage in the entire playoffs. You look at Madison Square Garden, for whatever reason, the Knicks haven't been able to feed off that crowd, but the Thunder have been able to feed off their crowd. They've lost 1 game there all season, which is why I'm picking them in 6 games. But the Pacers are in the role that they continue to thrive in. That is the underdog role. They've been picked against, and now probably 3 straight series, including the NBA Finals. And I think they respond to that. The answer for Shea is a completely fair argument. I don't think Aaron Nesmith is going to be able to stop Shea. I'm not arguing that whatsoever, but we have seen Jalen Brunson struggle in parts of this series, especially in the last few games of this series. I think Aaron Nesmith, if he can get into non-foul trouble and just defend Shea straight up, is going to be enough to win 2 games in this series.
That's a valid point. I think Aaron Nesmith plays with a lot of heart, and it just depends on what the referees are allowing and what they're not. If they're allowing Shea to get these touch fouls and they're allowing him to get these foul calls that the internet has been complaining about, then Nesmith will get into foul trouble early. But I think the NBA Finals will be officiated much more physically, and Shea, for all the knock that he gets on the foul stuff, I think Shea plays through contact exceptionally well. Yes. And he doesn't need any of that stuff to dominate. There are plenty of times where he actually does get fouled and he still gets those and ones because he's just that strong at the catch point when he shoots the ball towards that mid-range area when he's finishing around the basket. So I think that OKC should handle business. I think the Minnesota series pretty much convinced me that this is a team that is steamrolling. And I think they're going to win game 1. I think they're going to win game 2. I think the Pacers take game 3. And then I think OKC proceeds to win the next 2. And that's the series.
I think the one thing the Pacers are not going to do is do what the Minnesota Timberwolves did in game 5. They're never going to lay down. No lead is safe with them. That's why I think it extends to 6. But let's just say we both agree that the Thunder are going to win. Let's talk big picture now of NBA champions, because I've heard this sentiment over the last week in the NBA media that they're set up to repeat better than any other team that has won in the last 6 years. And I'm not saying I disagree with that, but looking back at the Boston Celtics, I think we would have felt that way last season as well. Long term, they're definitely set up extremely better than the Boston Celtics, especially with the new ownership and stuff coming in. But Denver, that was a team that was picked to repeat as well. I think we're starting to get caught up in the current moment of the Thunder are one of the greatest teams recently. I think Boston and the run they had last year is something that nobody should sneeze at. OKC is going to have multiple years of title contention left, but I think it's a little overblown as far as like big picture stuff that they're the greatest recent champion, even though they haven't won it yet. If they win it, that they're the greatest recent champion. To that, you say what?
I say that it's wrong. I think they are the greatest recent champion if they win. If we were talking about how OKC looked in the first 4 games of the Denver series, I think this is a different conversation because they look like an inexperienced, immature team in moments. But since that period, they have looked like the best version of themselves. And I think that the difference between Boston and Denver is that when Denver won, they lost Bruce Brown. They lost Jeff Green. The year after, they lose KCP. They were losing pieces year after year. With Boston, they paid Tatum. They paid Jaylen Brown. They traded for Holiday. They extended him. They have Porzingis on it expiring right now. The Celtics are above the second apron. I think if I'm not mistaken, the player who makes the most money on OKC right now is Hartenstein, salary wise.
Mhm.
Shea, his extension has not happened yet. It will inevitably.
Mhm.
Chet's extension has not happened yet. It will inevitably. J Dubs has not happened yet. It will inevitably. So 3 years down the line, I can see where OKC starts to get into some financial troubles where they have to make some real crucial, critical decisions. But right now, they have a leeway of 2 to 3 years before they have to realistically worry about all those things and the financial implications that comes with having multiple star players on your team. And I'm looking at this team in one, they held the Grizzlies to 19.4 points below their average. In round two, they held the Nuggets to 15 points below their average. In the conference finals, they held the Wolves to 3.3 points below their average. You look at their stock and their stake in NBA history in terms of all-time teams. They're entering the NBA Finals with the second best point differential, regular season plus playoffs in NBA history. The only team better was the only team better was the 1971 Bucks with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. SGA joins MJ, Kobe, Shaq, Kareem to win MVP, lead the league in scoring, and make the finals in the same season. And he's one of three players to have 30 plus points, 5 plus assists at least 10 times in a single postseason. Only Michael Jordan and LeBron James have done that. You
Mhm.
have an MVP, you have J Dub and Chet, who they're only growing and getting better with age. And right now, they're all star caliber players. And then you have the role players around them, like Dort, like Caruso, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, Hartenstein. And this team is stacked top to bottom, Case and Wallace. But I think what puts them over the top is the fact that they have 20 picks in the draft over the next 5 years. That is on average 4 picks per draft, which is an absurd number. So I look at all the flexibility OKC has, even if they get into some contract troubles, they're going to be able to consistently recoup and draft good, talented players and have them on cheap deals around their core. So I just look at this team, and this team has the best chance of any team in the last 6 years to be a dynasty.
Yes, that I 100% agree with. And it's a nod to Sam Presti. It's crazy we're sitting here having this conversation about all of their chances to repeat, all of their chances to be a potential dynasty. And that stat of them having 20 draft picks. The most insane part of this is if it didn't go well this year and Denver wins game 7, they had the assets to go out and get Giannis and compete with San Antonio and Houston in that race. That's the most amazing part of it. Looking back at this season, at the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, the West all season was talked about being a much better conference than the East. Now, outside of Denver and OKC, obviously, I don't know if I feel that much better about the West and the top teams in that conference compared to the top teams in the Eastern Conference. OKC and Denver is really the only two squads I feel good about in the West after these playoffs and talking about this season alone. And you look at the East, Indiana has cemented their right possibly in the NBA Finals. New York made a conference finals run. Boston, who knows what happens? I think New York was in control of that series. They were going to go up 3-1 regardless of the Tatum injury, but they were a great team all season long. Cleveland was an amazing team throughout the regular season. Did we get this synopsis of the conferences wrong, or is that just an overreaction to what we've seen in the NBA playoffs?
I think it's an overreaction. I still think the West is better than the East,
Mhm.
especially when we get into the deeper standings of East Conference. I think the teams in the East, like the Hornets and Wizards and
For sure.
the Raptors and the Nets, are irrelevant,
Mhm.
where even the Bulls and the Hawks, in the landscape of where we're at right now, the Heat, they're irrelevant. I look at the West and I'm saying the Spurs are up and coming. I kind of like what the Blazers are building out as well.
Yeah.
I like the Rockets, who were the second seed, but they have a chance to get a star this offseason. I look at the Lakers and they're going to retool around Luca. I look at Denver, like you mentioned, OKC, they're powerhouses. I'm not sleeping on Minnesota. They've been to back-to-back conference finals, even though they've lost. They are also a great team. I think if Minnesota, a team like them, if they were in the Eastern Conference, they'd be in the conference finals.
Yeah.
I think they're that good. I think, in the Western Conference, it's just very tough to make it out the finals. What I will say,
I disagree with the Minnesota thing. I think the New York Knicks would have taken care of them just like they took care of the Boston Celtics. But I think top four compared to top four, or top five compared to top five this season, it's an argument at least that the Eastern Conference teams were better as a whole than the Western Conference team. OKC is in a class of its own, but I'm talking about the top heaviness of the Eastern Conference compared to the Western Conference, because after you have OKC, Denver would probably be second, Minnesota would probably be third. I don't know who the fourth and fifth options are in the Eastern Conference or in the Western Conference. In the East, you could easily pencil in Cleveland right there. I think it was much overblown how much better the West was than the East this season. I get what you're saying from 1 to 10. I understand that. I'm not arguing 7 through 10 or 10 through 15, but I think it was overblown how much better those top teams in the West were better than the top teams in the East.
I just think the star power in the West is better. I think it's greater. I think they have more superstar players. We look at the landscape of the NBA. Let's just look at top 10 players real quick. Jokic, Giannis, Luka, Shea, Jason Tatum is hurt, so I don't want to put him in this ranking. But
talking about this season, you can put him in the ranking. I'm talking about this season. But I'm not talking about moving forward.
LeBron James, Steph Curry, Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis when he's healthy. Even though they didn't make the playoffs, but I still think that's a star. Most of the top 10 players, I think like 7 or 8 of them are in the West.
I think the Golden State Warriors, a team who made the second round. I think both the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics, the two second-round teams in the Eastern Conference, would have beat them in a playoff series. That's what I'm saying.
With the healthy Steph?
Yes. Boston and Cleveland, yes. If Tatum's healthy, yeah.
I don't know too much. I agree with Boston. Cleveland still has to show me something consistently.
For sure.
They got to be healthy when it matters.
Yep.
But, I just look at the last 3-4 Western Conference Finals MVPs. This year it was Shea. Last year it was Luka. The year before it was Jokic. The year before that it was Steph Curry. The conference finals MVPs that have come out have been, all 4 of them are all-time great offensive players and engines. So I look at the West and, even with the East being strong this year, which I agree with, it's also like the team that's representing the West is led by Shea, an MVP, and the team representing the East is Halliburton, which he's no slouch. I think he's a star. Mm-hmm. But it's a considerable gap between where those two players are. And I think last year you could have maybe made the argument with Luka and Tatum, even though people would have Tatum over Luka because of defense. I understand that. The year before, though, Jokic versus Jimmy Butler. The year before that, Curry versus Tatum.
For sure.
I think the West just has that advantage with the stars.
I'm not talking about last year. I'm not talking about moving forward, because moving forward, the East is obviously going to be historically bad with Tatum hurt next year. If Giannis gets traded, I'm not even going to go into that. But I think this year, in a nutshell, is at least a bigger conversation than a lot of people made it out to be.
There are at least 3 teams in the East that don't make the playoffs in the West.
It's fair. And
Pistons, Magic, and Heat.
Yep. And like I said, I'm comparing top 4 and top 5 teams to top 4 and 5 teams in the Western Conference. I think the Lakers thing was really overblown. Same with Golden State. I think Steph would make it a series with Minnesota, but I'm not so sure how good Minnesota is after this series. Julius Randle, I know that he played great in the first and second round, but once he saw a respectable defense, I should say, he went right back to his old ways. I think he had a better series than Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards seemed like a more of a maturity thing, but I think Ant in this current state needs a better second option than Julius Randle.
It was a good defense. It was an all-time defense.
For sure.
So I'm not going to knock Julius Randle too much for it. He showed throughout the entire playoffs that he can elevate his game.
He's going to get a bag, and he deserves it. I'll put it that way. He will definitely get a bag and has changed his trajectory of this year's free agency, and he deserves every penny.
They ran into an all-time tough defense that made Jokic struggle statistically outside of one game, made Kawhi struggle, and we'll see how they make the Pacers struggle in the finals. But it is true that OKC is just that good that Julius Randle can look like this against them. And if I was a team in the West, right now, if I'm a team in the West, I'm telling myself that the only way we can beat OKC is if we wait out
Stop.
their time period.
This is absolutely ridiculous because we're
That's
literally
it.
one series away from a game 7 happening. If Aaron Gordon doesn't have one hamstring, what happens in that game? I know Jokic is an all-time player, but still, OKC talking about how they're one of the greatest teams ever is ridiculous. I didn't come on this podcast to hate on them. I think everything they have done is earned, and the way they have built this roster has been truly incredible. Shea's one of the greatest trades of all time, but let's not act like they didn't have a 7-game series. Boston last year never had that. Yes, it was a different conference, but they did play the winner of the Western Conference. This OKC team, we're not going to put them up there with the all-time Warriors team and the freaking 92 Bulls. This is, I know I'm going to have to get used to hearing it because
it's the second best net rating ever.
Okay, but it's fair. But they went through a 7-game series. To talk like they're just head and shoulders above everyone else, Denver had 5 to 6 viable rotation players on the roster. Julian Strawther is not that. And if Denver goes back and retools, I think Denver can beat them in a conference finals next year. That's not crazy.
Denver has as good of a chance as anybody. They have the best chance.
Yes.
If they retool. But overall, like if I'm Minnesota, I'm like, okay, right now is not the time to make all-in moves. I gotta be a little bit patient. Be a little bit patient to when they start paying J-Dub and Chet and Shea. Not saying you're tanking. I'm just saying this isn't the time to like trade the house for Giannis if you're the Rockets and like, yeah, we're going to get Giannis and we're going to beat OKC. I don't think that either. You know, I think that you have to wait out their time period to when they get paid and the second apron hits and they lose that depth, because for the next 2 years, they are going to have by far and away the most talented roster in the NBA.
For sure.
The only thing that can stop them is the inconsistencies from the co-stars around Shea. Injuries, that always plays into a part. But if they're healthy, J-Dub and Chet maturing and being consistent like we saw them in the conference finals, this team is unbeatable.
Unbeatable.
It's unbeatable.
Way too strong of a word. That's what I
J-Dub
heard.
And Chet are
That's
playing
what I heard going
all-star
into
levels.
these playoffs. That's what I heard going into these playoffs. And Denver, a team who fired their coach with 3 games left in the season and had 5 to 6 rotation players, took them to 7 games.
And
this team is not unbeatable. They are great and an all-time great team, and I will 100% agree with that, but unbeatable is ridiculous.
They're unbeatable in a playoff series. Denver took them to 7. The next 2 against the Grizzlies and the Wolves combined, they were 8-1.
Yes.
And in the finals, I told you I think they're going to win in 5. So that would mean in the conference finals in the first round and then the NBA finals, they would be 12-2. It was really only Denver that gave them that challenge.
You're not hearing me. They are an all-time great team. I'm admitting that, but unbeatable. We almost watched them get beat. And if it wasn't for an AG injury, they might have gotten beat.
I think next year they're unbeatable. I think, unless the Nuggets make some serious moves.
Yeah. The Nuggets need to get one more viable guy, and I think they have a real shot at beating Oklahoma City. And the Clippers, I'm not going to sit here and say that they would beat OKC, but I think it would be a better series than the Minnesota series.
My goodness. Let's be serious here.
We're being serious.
They'd lose. James Harden
they would lose, but they would have a shot
in that series.
They would have a better shot
and
than Minnesota.
Think what you're ignoring is that in the Denver series, J-Dub was bad for like 5 games in that series. He had 2 great games. I think it was game 7 and then like game 2. Yep. Chet, he was inconsistent in that series. What I'm saying is if J-Dub and Chet are playing consistent and at an all-star level, they are unbeatable. There's no way they could be beat.
Yeah.
If they're playing at that high of a level, is you can't. They're too good.
They can't. They're too good. Chet averaged 15 points a game this year. And we're talking about him being unbeatable. This is ridiculous.
He had a hip injury.
Okay. I think Chet and Jaylen, if you would have made the argument, hey, Jack, 2 years from now, next year even, they're going to be better players than they were this year, that could, potentially go into them being unbeatable. I've been like, you know what, there's not many comebacks I can have to that. But this current team was not unbeatable. But
they are going to get better.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing.
So how are they going to, that's what I'm saying. With their growth, with what they have, how I'm saying the only way that teams in the West could compete is waiting out the
I
extensions.
think Denver is going to get better. Denver's not going to sit on their hands and do nothing
They
this
shouldn't.
offseason.
They shouldn't.
Yes.
They have an all-time player in Jokic. They should be trying to compete. And there's going to be teams that will still try to compete. But it's much like the Warriors era when they got KD. The Rockets had Harden, and they still tried to compete, and they lost.
This is the parity era, bro. This is not going to be the Golden State. We can just pencil in OKC as champions for the next 2 to 3 years.
OKC is as good of a chance as anybody. They're better than any of the last 6 champions.
I think they're set up better than any of the last 6 champions.
I would say they're better than the 2019 Raptors. The 2019 Raptors have an argument with the depth, and if Kawhi stayed there, maybe they could have went back-to-back. And he left after that first year. The Celtics.
I'm looking at the last 2. I'm looking at that Denver team, and I'm looking at the Celtics.
I'm looking at the Celtics, and the Celtics got a real argument for it. I just think top to bottom, I think OKC is deeper, and then I think Shea is just the best player between those two teams.
Make the Denver argument.
I don't think there is one.
That Denver team was infinitely better than this year's Denver team, and this year's Denver team took them to 7 games. And you think there's no argument?
The maturation period from Chet and J-Dub, what I think they're going to be next year, no.
You can't even say it with a straight face. Let's move.
No, I mean, listen, Denver, I mean, they were great. I'm not saying to say they weren't. Mm-hmm. They also won no series against a 50-win team that year. But and the Suns with Kevin.
But you agree that Denver team.
Booker.
You agree that Denver team is better than this year's Denver team, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, I agree. And this year's Denver team took them to 7 games.
So you think if we're stacking up that Denver team and this OKC team, if you're okay,
I think it'd at least be a 7-game series.
I'm picking between these two teams, the teams that are most likely to go back-to-back. You're picking Denver.
I'm not saying most likely going to back-to-back. You said the greatest champion of the last 6 years. I think if we're talking about greatest champion in this pocket, not talking about what they're going to be 2-3 years from now, if 2023 Denver team played the 2025 OKC team, I think it would at least be 7 games because the 2025 Denver team took them to 7 games as a worst team.
What I'm looking at when I talk about an all-time great team is the statistical criteria and the historical context in which they're featured in. And
don't bring up big words. Don't bring up big words.
OKC is second in net rating all-time in the regular season plus the playoffs.
Okay.
They have all the numbers that are backing them up. I think 2023 was a historic Jokic run. I thought it was. And I thought Jamal Murray also played phenomenally. And you can't discount what the role players did either. But this OKC team, they have all of those records right now that are going in line. They'd be the second youngest team in history to win a championship. Second best
all-time great team
ever.
All-time great.
Statistically, they'd be the cream of the crop.
All-time great team. They're not unbeatable, and there is an argument with the last 2 NBA champions, much less the last 6 NBA champions. That's all I'm here to say. Because all we're going to hear for the next week, and probably after they beat the Pacers, is how this is an all-time unbeatable team like you just said it was, and I just simply disagree with that notion. This is
I don't think it's an
era of parity. Go ahead.
I don't think it's an unbeatable team in the sense of all-time historical context. I don't think 2023 Denver can't sniff these dudes. What I'm saying is with J-Dub and Chet moving forward, playing at all-star levels consistently, this team is unbeatable moving forward in the next 1 to 2 years. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, fair. What I will say, and I think this will be the closest we will get, is they are set up by far the best to be a dynasty, which is what you said, and is the minor part of your argument that I agree with. Let's talk about your New York Knicks, though. So we covered the Pacers, Thunder, potential NBA Finals series. Was not expecting to argue that much about the Thunder. Didn't come on here to hate about them. But I want to talk about New York and where they go from here because of how much the pendulum has swung in this series. We're going to start with Tibbs and then get on to potential roster moves they can make as well. But my question for all the Tibbs critics are, if it's not him, who is the guy? Because New York fans know this, but they have not been the best over the last 20 to 25 years until Tibbs came around. He was brilliant to me in that Boston series and baiting them to play the game that New York wanted them to play. To me, he was amazing in Game 3. Michael Malone is the name that a lot of Knicks fans want if it's not Tibbs. But Michael Malone is not getting that team to play defense any better than Tom Thibodeau is. I have not seen Michael Malone win playoff games without Nikola Jokic. I don't think Michael should have been fired. I don't think he should have been fired in Sacramento, but that doesn't change the tide of firing Tom Thibodeau. And, because they have Michael Malone, they would have beat the Indiana Pacers and made it to the NBA Finals. So my question to you is, how do you feel about Tom Thibodeau? And if it's not him, who is it?
I think Tom Thibodeau has done an awful job in this series for the most part. I think that game 4, the lineups that he played, or I should say, is it game 3 or game 4? No, game 3. Game 3, the lineups that he played were really good. I thought it was the first time that I felt like, okay, he's pressing the right buttons. But for the most part in this series, I thought he's been underwhelming. It's very hard, number one, and this is where I'll give him some grace. It's very hard to build a defense when you have 2 defensive liabilities on the floor.
Yes.
That's Brunson and that's Cat. And there has been this conversation around the both of them, around their positions, around their archetypes. Which one is harder to mask for on defense? And at first, I was going to go with Cat. I think centers, rim protectors, they have more of an influence defensively, and them getting targeted is worse than a smaller player getting targeted. Then I was rewatching the film and looking at it, and game 4 was an all-time bad performance from Jaylen Brunson on the defensive side of the ball. Historically bad when we look at all the context of it. He allowed 1.63 points per pick on defense, which is the most in a playoff game since 2013 and 2014 season. Last year, the Pacers, Brunson was defending 32 pick and rolls as a screener defender last year in the second round series. This year, it's at 95. So almost 3 times more is Brunson being put into those actions against this Pacers offense. And they are abusing that completely. I think in the modern NBA, there are more guard-to-guard actions. There are more guard screeners. With the Pacers, we see a lot of the times that they're running different variations of pick and rolls where you might have Miles Turner setting a down screen and then Aaron Nesmith being the ball screener. And that basically puts 2 defenders, I would say actually 3 defenders, in conflict in that. And on a lot of those actions, Jaylen Brunson is the guy that's being lost. And I think both are bad defenders, and it's really hard to mask for one of them. If you have 2 of them on the floor, it is almost impossible to guard an offense as great as the Pacers. So Tom Thibodeau was playing disadvantaged because he can't maximize the defense with 2 liabilities on the floor. And I don't think Josh Hart has been a good defender either. He's an average defender. I think he's had his bad moments. But also, I think Tibbs has done a poor job at maximizing the offense because I think everybody knows that the defense is not good or is not that good, especially with Brunson and Cat. But the offense, to maximize Cat at the 5 and to maximize Brunson, you need to have a 5-out lineup. Everybody on the floor needs to be able to shoot consistently. Josh Hart can't shoot. And Josh Hart in the lineup with OG, Mikal, Brunson, and Cat is the most played lineup for the Knicks in the postseason. It's also negative. It has not been a good lineup the entire postseason. They have been detrimental. So like Deuce McBride makes more sense to start because he can shoot the ball and you can maximize the offense, but you're giving up a lot on defense. So there is no right answer where you're not sacrificing something. But if you have Brunson and Cat out there, the defense is bad. And then if you have Hart on offense, the offense is also bad because that's somebody Indiana doesn't have to guard. So they can help on all these actions. They can help on Brunson drives. They can leave Hart open and they're living with a 3-point shot attempt from him. So I think Tibbs is getting some fair criticism. And I do think that us choking in game 1 is warranted for him to get criticism, even though it's also on the players. It's also on him to understand the flow of the game and to make sure that we don't blow a lead when we're up by that much with a minute left.
To me, it's absolutely insane that we even have to have this conversation because I think they have a comparable team to last season. They just knocked off the defending world champion, Tatum's injury or not. They were up 3-1. And now that the fact that they're going to lose in possible 5 to 6 games in the conference finals, their fans are already wanting his head. That would be like Minnesota last year beating Denver, the defending world champions at the time, losing in 5 games to Dallas and asking for Chris Finch to be fired. That's how crazy this is to me. He has shown more growth in these playoffs than the rest of his career. I'm not going to deny that he has made mistakes in this series, but I go back to the beginning part of your soliloquy. He is playing from a severely disadvantaged position right now. I'm not going to argue that he hasn't maximized the lineups, that he hasn't maximized the offense, but he is playing coaching from a severely disadvantaged position right now. Speaking of that disadvantaged position, let's talk about the roster. I think Zach Lowe said he's sneaky extension eligible this summer. A lot of noise around Giannis, obviously, because it's the New York Knicks. I don't think the Bucks would be interested in Cat for Giannis. I believe they would need to use the remaining pick equity to get one more viable guy. Pick equity and Precious Achiuwa just to get a guy like Keon Ellis, just somebody who can get on the court and be an 8th or 9th man on the roster that's not Landry Shamet or DeLon Wright. Zach Lowe also said the biggest competitive advantage in sports is playing in the NBA Eastern Conference next season, and he's absolutely right. I was here on this podcast arguing about the East being misrepresented this season, especially the top 4 teams, but next year he's 100% right with the Tatum injury, with Giannis's future in Milwaukee up in the air. They don't need to do much to be right back there next year. They need to get another shooter or 3-and-D kind of guy on this roster, and I think they're going to be just fine.
I think that banking on circumstances that happened that are anomalies is a tough place to live in. This is why I say that. I think Tom Thibodeau has been great for the Knicks. I think he's done a great job changing the culture. You also can't get emotional about jobs or historical context in regards to seasons. Like, oh, this is the first time the Knicks have made the conference finals in 25 years. That's awesome. That's a great accomplishment. But at the same time, here's let me finish. At the same time, in the first round, we were taken to 6 by the Pistons, who are an awesome team. You can argue the Pistons played better than us for most of the series, but the fourth quarter was the separator where Jalen Brunson was heroic. Games 1 and 2 versus Boston, we came back down 20 points. That's never happened in NBA history.
It's culture.
A lot of things went right for the Knicks, especially in the second round, to get to the conference finals. And those same things now we're seeing, we're outplayed, we're getting outcoached, and we don't look like we have the best roster on the floor. So the Knicks do have to make moves this offseason. And I think the worst thing they could do is stand pat and think that we're just going to be back. I think that they have to make some serious moves. They have to look at the roster and look at what needs to be upgraded, because there does need to be upgrades, especially to the depth.
We can live in this alternate universe. Yes, they had historic comebacks in the Celtics, but they also had an historic collapse in game 1. There is this, we could be waking up on Thursday and the series is 2-2 going back to New York if they don't have that all-time historic collapse. And these Tom Thibodeau conversations would not even be happening. I think if you look at the Indiana Pacers just last year, the NBA media, myself included, said that they would be the Atlanta Hawks of 2021 because they stood pat, they did not get better, and we were completely wrong. Continuity has been their calling card throughout this entire NBA postseason. And landscape where there is no continuity, you see what that does for a team like the Pacers. The Pacers have had one guy all season who has barely averaged 20 points per game as their best player, and have ran through the Eastern Conference. I think straying and overreacting to an historic collapse is the real crime, not being emotional about that this roster doesn't need anything. I'm not saying that. They could get better, but it's not. What is Cat going to get you in this market? What happens when you fire Tom Thibodeau? Who are you going to hire? Those are the answers to the questions that I don't have, and I don't know if Knicks fans have, that is going to make them all automatically better. They're going to play in a shit conference next year, an even worse conference than they were in this year. And I think if they can just add one more playable piece, they're going to be right back in the conference finals. And who knows if they have that same collapse that they did this year.
Well, I think that the Pacers have outplayed the Knicks for 3 games this series. I know that game one we had a collapse, but I thought game three, when we came back down 20 against the Pacers looked, like the more fluid team for most of that game. And, we were able to chip away at the lead and then make a run in the fourth quarter. So I think the Pacers are just better than us. I think, I got to give them a lot of credit for how they executed. And before the season, I mean, I didn't feel that way about Indiana. Indiana was my most underrated team coming into the season. I had debates with my co-host about Indiana versus Cleveland, who has a better future, and I picked Indiana.
Yeah.
And I thought that people were sleeping on the depth that Indiana had, and I thought Halliburton was a star back in 2023. I said
You
he would
didn't.
be the modern day
You
Steve
didn't.
Nash.
You didn't predict them to beat Cleveland. You didn't predict them to be back in the conference finals. That's my point.
I did not predict them to beat Cleveland, but Cleveland got hurt, and that's where I think we can't just overlook the East next season because Cleveland is going to be back with a similar roster. And if they're healthy, they can give the Knicks a run for their money. The Pacers are going to be back as well. And those are the two teams at the top of the East that you're kind of worried about a
Those
little
are the
bit.
three teams at the top of
Well,
the East.
but we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Their teams are not done making moves. Like, what if the Pistons make a big splash? What if the Magic make a big splash? I think that there are teams out there that they have an opportunity now to, go all in and make some big time moves to make sure that they're back in this spot. Now, like I said, I don't think the Knicks shouldn't be back. I think that if they make the right moves, we have a great chance to be
okay.
back. But they need to make the right moves. They need to press the right buttons.
We keep talking about the right moves and right buttons. My question still has not been answered. If it's not Tom Thibodeau, who is it? And if it's not Cat, then who is it? If you're going to give up on Cat and this Jalen Brunson pairing, what is the answer that's going to put them in a better position than the conference finals?
Then the conference finals, probably, there's very slim options.
Exactly. That's why
to
I'm
make
saying
them a
run it
better
back.
team, there are options. I think Mikal is somebody I would look at to
Okay.
move. That's what I would do. I think Josh Hart is somebody I would look at to move.
Josh Hart, I wouldn't mind. Maybe that's a lever you pull. I know my team would be very interested in Josh Hart. Mikal Bridges, that's where he gets dicey because I don't know what you're going to get in return for him, especially when you just gave up 5 first-round picks.
It's good that you mentioned that because I actually have the perfect trade package for him.
All right, let's talk about it. I just want answers on why that Knicks fans feel like some drastic move needs to be made for this team to be right back where they are this year.
It's because Tibbs got outcoached, man. That's why. It's because he got outcoached in the series. And yeah, he was at a personnel disadvantage, but what's the excuse for Landry Shamet playing over Deuce McBride in the final minutes of the fourth quarter?
There is no excuse, but it's the alternative option. Michael Malone's not going to change how I feel about the New York Knicks next year. And no other coach on the market is.
I don't want Mike Malone. So
okay, who do you want?
Fine.
Who do you want? Who would you take over Tibbs that's on the market?
I don't know. I like the idea of a young coach that's innovative offensively. I like the idea of young coaches. I like the idea of coaches that nobody really knows yet that kind of comes out of nowhere and improves things. I think it's a risk, but I don't think Tom Thibodeau is going to get fired. I think he gets an extra year to make something work with the roster.
And do you think he should?
Love him.
Do you think he should? Because I do.
Yeah, I think he should. I think he's earned it. But overall, I also think it depends on what happens in Game 5. I think if the Knicks lose at MSG at home and they get gentlemen swept, I think there's going to be real conversations about it. And CP, the franchise from Knicks Fan TV,
love him.
He's very tapped in. And he said that Tibbs is on thin ice if they lose in Game 5. So I think it becomes more of a conversation if we get gentlemen swept.
That's New York. Can we talk about the Mikal Bridges trade, by the way?
Yeah, it was part of my trades to save teams.
All right, we'll start with the Knicks. We'll start with the Knicks thing. All right, so one perfect trade, our trade target for every NBA team this summer. Since we're talking about the Knicks, we'll start with Joel's Knicks trade.
Now, this is based on a report that I seen years ago, and I've decided, you know what? Let me send them Mikal Bridges. So the trade is between the Grizzlies and the Knicks. And the Grizzlies would get Mikal Bridges, who at one point they offered 5 first-round picks for.
Yep.
Very happy for you guys. You guys get an incredible player. He's also extension eligible because he's on an expiring. So, happy riddance with that.
You're not getting Jaren Jackson or Desmond Bane.
Okay. No, yeah, you're right. I don't want them because the Knicks are going to get Brandon Clark. Oh, I like that. Brandon Clark's solid. Good bench piece.
He's coming off a torn ACL.
John Conchar. A 2027 first-round pick. Give me that first-round pick. But you know what's the cherry on top in this deal, Jack? They're getting Jalen Wells.
I swear to God, I would do that in a heartbeat. And do you think Knicks fans would be excited about a return of John Conchar, Brandon Clark after a torn ACL and torn Achilles, and Jalen Wells?
Jalen Wells was a better defender this past season than
Wow. Wow.
Mikal did not defend ball screens well. He was horrible this year
Was he
at
just
him.
horrible in that Boston series as well, or
He was
what
inconsistent.
about what about
He
the
had
end
his
of game
moments.
one and game two of the Boston series? I don't envision Jalen Wells doing that.
Well, I think Jalen Wells has size. He's a good defender. He can hit shots, and I think for a fraction of the price, he can do what Mikal can do.
Okay.
Most of what Mikal could do.
Hey,
He can give you 70% of Mikal Bridges at like $2 million per year.
hey, if the Knicks are interested in that and their fans like yourself are interested in that, I would be all for it. I
Maybe you
swear to
send
God, I
two
wouldn't even
firsts, three
negotiate.
firsts.
However
Well,
many,
yeah,
yeah, we can do three first. I don't care. That would be
yeah.
amazing.
I'm gifting the Grizzlies a chance at contention here with John Morant, Desmond Bane, Mikal, Jaren Jackson Jr. I mean, my goodness, this
More
might
jaw
be the new
insurance too.
unbeatable.
Give me all the
This
jaw
might be the
insurance.
new
Yes.
unbeatable team of 2025 and 2026. The
It's so
Mikal Bridges Grizzlies.
so funny. He was the second name I had for the Grizzlies targets, but yeah, I don't hate it. I'd mention, like a couple like small low salary guys for the Knicks, just to go with my argument that we had, but no, I love that. That's a great trade to bring.
I had
Let's
forgotten that Brandon Clark tore his ACL, so we might need to get somebody else. You might need to sign
it
and trade
was
as Luke Kennard or something.
I'll have to look it up. I don't think it was ACL. It was something with the knee. I think it was PCL, and then it was torn Achilles the year before. So it was like you're talking about an Achilles and a PCL. Like we would be happy for anybody that would take him right now. Unfortunately,
You're sleeping on Jalen Wells, man.
I don't think I'm sleeping on him at all. I think if it's for Mikal Bridges, that is a trade I make, and Mikal Bridges matches our timeline better. Jalen Wells, I don't know if you watched towards the end of the year, but yes, he had a great start. But the final month of his tenure before he got injured, his March was horrendous. When games started to matter and they had to win games for seeding, Jalen Wells is not knocking down shots. It just comes with being young. And much less a New York fan base in Madison Square Garden in the conference finals or the second round or the first round. If Jalen Wells can't show up in March and February for the Grizzlies, I don't know if he can show up for the Knicks in April and May. But, hey, if you're willing to take him, you're willing to take him. Let's stay with the East. Let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks. I think a dream target for them would obviously be Jaylen Brown, but I don't think Boston's going to be willing to give up on him or anything. But I think they need all the defensive wings around Trae Young that they can get. Dyson Daniels had an amazing season this year, but if they were able to pluck away a guy like Jaden McDaniels from Minnesota, I think that would be a name that would go perfectly alongside Jalen Johnson and Trae Young moving forward.
I think that would be a great combination.
Mm-hmm. You got anything for Atlanta?
I don't have anything for Atlanta. I think Atlanta's going to stand pat. The trades that I made were trades of teams that I think that it's like the most realistic
Fair
trades. So for me, Rockets and Bucks. The Rockets get Giannis, and the Bucks acquire Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith, Reed Shepherd, and 4 first-round picks.
I know this may sound crazy. If I'm Milwaukee, I'm asking for 5.
I would give them 5. I mean, if the Rockets feel that strongly about Giannis and they want to go all in, I think it makes sense. I think Şengün is the centerpiece in the deal. I love Şengün. Jalen Green is too inconsistent for the Bucks to say, yeah, give us Jalen Green.
Yeah,
Amen Thompson is untouchable. So I think the move there is Alperen Şengün has the most value.
I love that.
It would mean a lot.
I love that because we talked about it last week. Like if I'm Houston, even though Jalen Green and all his inconsistencies, Şengün's a better player right now, but a Şengün-Giannis pairing doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. I think the ceiling on a Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, and Giannis pairing would be phenomenal. And if it doesn't work out, you keep Amen and you can flip Jalen for something else. I think that would be the perfect move for them. Speaking of the Boston Celtics, I think the financial relief is obviously the number one thing that they need. If they could find a way to flip Drew Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis for a guy like Walker Kessler, I think that could be the longer term replacement for an Al Horford. And their lack of big man depth. Xavier Tillman's been unplayable for them. I know Walker Kessler's going to have a lot of bidders, but if you can find a way, even a part of a 3-team deal to get your hands on him, I think that would be a centerpiece around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for the future.
I think that's great. And I have one for the Celtics as well that's going to cause a splash.
Let's do it.
Um, this is between the Spurs and the Celtics. The
Mm,
Celtics would get Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, and 2 first-round picks. And
Jalen.
the Spurs get Jaylen Brown, and they have a big three of De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, and Victor Wembanyama.
And it makes sense on both sides. It really does. New ownership's going to have a serious look in the mirror if they want to come in and immediately split up Tatum and Brown and how that would go over with the PR department. But if I'm getting, you know, young stars like that in return, I think it's definitely worth having a conversation about.
You get Stephon Castle on a rookie deal. Devin Vassell's on a manageable 22 per million deal. It makes them significantly cheaper and it's more affordable for the team. And then you have those picks from the Hawks that could turn into something. So I think
Yep.
that it makes sense for Boston. I don't know if they're going to be willing to move off of Jaylen Brown, but those are the decisions that they're going to have to wrestle with. And if a team is aggressive in offering a package that they can't deny, they will not deny it.
Yes, I definitely agree with that sentiment. I have three Eastern Conference teams that could do minor things, and you can, if you have a trade for any of these teams, you can talk about it. If not, we can keep on moving. Brooklyn Nets feel like a dream Jonathan Kuminga fit. I have them and the Trailblazers as possible like Kuminga landing spots that I want to see him at. Charlotte Hornets, they need defense badly. If they could find a way to get their hands on Trey Murphy somehow, I think that would make sense. Chicago Bulls, we just heard the Vucevic news. They're looking to shop him. They're going to be looking for centers next to Josh Giddey, next to Kobe White, next to Buzelis. Daniel Gafford seems like a guy that's going to be available in Dallas. So I think for those three teams, those three names make sense. Do you have anything for those squads at all?
Yeah, I have one for the Bulls. And listen, the Bulls are a franchise that they need a star. They need an attraction. They need something for the fan base to get excited about. So if I'm the Bulls, I'm calling up the Pelicans. Hey, listen, we'll trade you Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Ayo DeSumo, and 2 first-round picks. And we want Zion Williamson. We want Zion Williamson to be the airness of Chicago and to fly through the skies like Michael Jordan once did and Derrick Rose once did. That's what we want. And also another Mavericks Bulls kind of deal, involving the Bulls again. The Mavericks get Lonzo Ball and the Bulls get Daniel Gafford. So the Bulls get a center, the Mavericks get a guard.
Yeah.
And in the deal, because Daniel Gafford has much more value than Lonzo Ball, in the deal where he goes to the Spurs, where he goes to the Bulls, the Mavericks are also getting a first-round pick in return because Gafford is valuable. So it's Lonzo in a first.
And we know that the Bulls don't get picks, they just give them. You know, they're never interested in getting any picks in return. So I'm sure they'd be willing to give them. That makes sense on both sides, especially all the reports coming out about Nico Harrison really wanting to target a guard to have for next season while Kyrie Irving's out. I think they're a team to watch and a Drew Holiday potential sweepstakes as well. Cleveland Cavaliers is another team in the East I want to talk about. They have one of the best trade chips in all of basketball. If you're thinking about if they're willing to trade a guy like Evan Mobley, Giannis has to be a name that I would at least call and offer Evan Mobley for. I don't know what other assets they have in return, but I heard, Ryan Russillo and Bill Simmons talking about straight up Mobley for Giannis. I don't do that under any circumstances, but it's worth a call.
The hardest thing in that is going to be making the salaries work.
Exactly.
That's the most difficult part about all of this because Giannis is getting 52 million. Evan Mobley is nowhere near that. So they'd have to package him along with some other players. I think Cleveland is going to make moves. I think that those moves are going to revolve around Garland and Jared Allen. I just think that we're seeing in the playoffs now for multiple years, either Garland is not playing well or he's hurt and Jared Allen is not rising up to the occasion. The first player I think about moving off of is Darius Garland because he's a smaller guard. He's going to get targeted on defense.
Yeah, with Donovan Mitchell.
We just see that, in the playoffs, teams that win are teams that are bigger, teams that don't give up multiple mismatches, teams that can hold up defensively. And with a smaller guard like Garland and having Mitchell there, you might need to upgrade that. So, I'm wondering if the Cavaliers are going to be open to trading him and what they'll get back in return can fit better. Defensive first guard who can shoot. They can definitely get things back for Garland. It's just about who it is.
Yeah, they're a team I'm going to be really interested in, and even more so that Shams went on Pat's show this week and said it's going to be the craziest offseason in the history of basketball. For him to say something like that, some shit's going to go down. And Cleveland's a team that is in that position of they can overreact to the last couple years of Donovan Mitchell, or they can stand pat and just look at the Eastern Conference and be like, you know what, it's going to be shit again next year. But that's going to be the decision they have to make. And I know the salaries and stuff is going to be a problem, that Evan Mobley for Giannis deal, but that's the move that I'm willing to shake it up for. Because depending on what you could get back for Garland, I think that more defines of if I'm willing to move off of him instead of, just shopping Garland around.
Yeah, I think those two make sense a lot. And I have one last blockbuster trade. It's between the Suns and Nuggets. We talk about how the Nuggets need to do something. The Nuggets get Kevin Durant, and they trade Michael Porter Jr., Deron Holmes, Dario Saric, Zeke Naji, and 3 first-round picks to go get KD.
That is so interesting because we've talked about how Kevin Durant's not going to have that many bidders at 37 years old, possibly looking for an extension as well. And MPJ, yes, that may not sound like enough star power, but if everybody's focused on Giannis and going all in on Giannis, I don't envision Houston being a viable option for Kevin Durant. Miami doesn't have a centerpiece like MPJ to put into that deal, in my opinion. So that would definitely be interesting, and I would consult with Jokic before doing anything. But what I had for the Phoenix Suns, call up Daniel or Morey at Philadelphia 76ers and talk about Paul George. Why?
Getting Paul George
to offload Bradley Beal. Have a conversation with Bradley Beal. Are you willing to waive it to go to the Philadelphia 76ers? That is the crux of their future. Bradley Beal is the crux of their future. And if that means getting Paul George's horrible contract in return, I would be willing to offload Beal for that.
It's like you're trading the same things. Paul George also puts
you're trading
the
same things, but one has a trade clause and the other one doesn't. So it's not the same thing.
I think Bradley Beal, he expires sooner. So Paul George, even if he doesn't have a no trade clause, his contract makes it so it's almost as if he does.
You don't think that they could waive Paul George and that rich ass owner couldn't just eat the salary to be in a better position than in jail with Bradley Beal still?
It would still count towards their cap.
That's fair. But still, I think it's worth a call because Beal, that is worse than Paul George in my opinion. And what is keeping them from possibly getting a better return on Kevin Durant even, because now you just have two redundancies of each other in Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. And that's why you're seeing all these conversations around Devin Booker, even though Phoenix has shut it down, because Bradley Beal is still there and because the options for Durant are limited, everybody's starting to point to Booker. But I like your trade much better, so we can definitely roll with that one. Let's see where I want to go from here. We covered the Lakers thing last week. Obviously, they need a big man. Clippers talked a little bit about a couple weeks ago, and we're talking about fixing every NBA playoffs loser. They just kind of need some big man depth. Let's talk about the LaMelo Ball thing here real quick. So LaMelo finally spoke on potentially leaving Charlotte and his future there. But before we talk about what he said, I made a video the other day detailing that Melo isn't having just one offseason surgery this summer. He's having two, one on his wrist, one on his ankle. Realistically, what team, if any, can you put him on and they become a contender? His brother Lonzo has hinted at the Clippers, but to me, that takes the ball out of James Harden's hands. It doesn't elevate them to me. Is there a team that is a contender with him on the roster?
I brainstormed the idea of him going to the Rockets. I think him on the Rockets, he can play more disciplined under Ime Udoka. Mm-hmm. He has defensive personnel around him. He's able to be himself. He can play make at a high level, and hopefully you can fix up the shot selection. But having a lineup of LaMelo Ball, Amen Thompson, Şengün, I think is really good. I think it gives them a scorer too who can take over games. But it's just, I think with LaMelo, it's so hard to project how he's going to look like in a winning environment. Yeah. If he's going to have those losing habits, if he's going to have those boneheaded plays, that play style is going to stick. It feels more like a open circuit AAU, I want to show out for scouts play style than I want to play winning basketball in the NBA play style. it's also his situation that's poor, so we can't properly judge it. But it's very hard because LaMelo is also going to be eligible for an extension. He's already getting paid a lot of money. So you're committing to LaMelo as either the best or the second best player on your team. And I just don't think LaMelo right now has shown that he could do that.
Completely agree with everything you said. And I think it's perfect that you brought up his play style in this as well, because it seems to me, even with his comments that he said, I think he's attached to that too. I think he likes having the leash he does, likes having the shot selection he can take. And basically, nothing's going to happen because I can play however I want to, and we're still going to win 15 games per year. He was asked about this, his future in Charlotte, and he said, "I'm never bothered by people telling me I should leave the Hornets. When you build something, it's ever going to be great. Right off the bat, I want to stay here and work it out." But I start to ask myself, is it because he wants to truly stay there and he's like in love with Charlotte, which is 100% a viable option? Or is he married to the style of play and the leash and the lack of pressure he has in that franchise?
I think he would love to build something there. Yeah, it wasn't too long ago where, Shea was on the OKC Thunder. They were losing and they were getting top picks.
Yep.
I think the difference is that the Hornets haven't really been able to draft. Brandon Miller was a great pick. Salawan this past year was a big miss, and they'll have another chance this year to draft somebody in the top 10, and we'll see if that pick pans out. But I think that's really the differentiator, is that the Hornets have been unable to make good moves around him and actually give this roster a chance. It's just lacking talent all around.
100% agree with everything you said. Let's talk about my Memphis Grizzlies. We talked about them in that a potential Knicks and Grizzlies blockbuster you had pitched earlier. But the number one guy I had on their trade target list in front of Mikal Bridges at 2 was Jaylen Brown. If you're the Boston Celtics, what would it take to tempt you to trade Jaylen Brown to the Memphis Grizzlies?
Jaren Jackson Jr.
It wouldn't be Desmond Bane and every pick they have.
Desmond Bane is also a realistic option too.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I don't think there's anything that could tempt me, because Desmond Bane, you can argue, is getting overpaid.
Yes.
Jaren is extension eligible soon. And for a team that is looking to save money, I don't think that an expensive player plus late first round picks is going to be all that valuable to them.
I agree with that, and that makes your Mikal Bridges trade that much more realistic, and I hope Knicks fans feel the exact same way that you do on that. Minnesota Timberwolves, they're kind of at a crossroads here. Julius Randle is going to be a free agent. Who knows what happens with him? Naz Reid's going to be a free agent as well. What piece do you see them having that can take them over the top? I know Boston wants to save money. They're wanting to move off Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis preferably, but I think Derek White would be an interesting name pairing next to Anthony Edwards. And Mike Conley, he's aging. We don't know what Rob Dillingham is yet. Derek White seems like a seamless fit alongside Anthony Edwards in Minnesota if they have a package that is tempting to the Boston Celtics.
Derek White is a winning player, and he would make the Timberwolves so much better. I think that's what they struggle with right now: guard penetration, having other players around Anthony Edwards that can expel the offensive responsibilities, and he brings defensive versatility as well. So I like that a lot. I think Derek White would be their number one option. I just don't know if they have the necessary salary pieces to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with that. I'm going to run down these final few teams, and you can just blurt out anything that stands out. But New Orleans Pelicans, all reports are pointing to them keeping Zion, and they want a veteran big to pair with him. Miles Turner is on the free agency market. I'm not sure they can afford him. Jared Allen, you had mentioned as a guy in Cleveland that, possibly that the Cavs would be willing to move. I put down Jared Allen for the Pelicans. New York Knicks, we had covered them in that trade. Oklahoma City, I put nothing for. Orlando Magic, I've said Trae Young a million times, but Darius Garland is another name that comes to mind for the Orlando Magic. The 76ers, they don't have a lot of options, but they do have a top pick, and they could use that to get a guy like Cam Johnson. That would be interesting for me. The Portland Trailblazers, I put down Michael Porter Jr. or Jonathan Kuminga. Sacramento Kings, they need defense. They were horrible in that aspect last year. Drew Holiday is going to be a guy available on the market for that. So I think that makes sense for a team in Sacramento. That makes no sense from a roster construction standpoint. San Antonio Spurs, it's obvious there. They got the number 2 overall pick. I think they can use that and their arsenal of picks to go get a guy like Giannis. Toronto Raptors, not too sure what they're doing. If they want to keep this Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, Brandon Ingram pairing, I don't know, maybe get a young big to match it like a Onyeka Okongwu out of Atlanta. Utah Jazz, I'd take a flyer on Reed Shepherd. Since if they can't get a top 3 pick this year, just go out and get a top 3 pick last year. Washington Wizards were dead last in defense last year. And Tari Eason, a guy, in Houston who could be moved off of if there was, a third team to get involved with a potential Giannis trade. I think Tari Eason makes sense for the Wizards.
I love Jared Allen going to the Pelicans. And in fact, I think that the Pelicans, they have something that I'd be very interested if I was them, if I was the Cavs, and that would be Herb Jones. I think that you move Evan Mobley to the full-time 5. You bring in Herb Jones to be that defender that can take on the best offensive player every single night. I think that's what they needed. This playoff showed that they need better perimeter defenders. I would start Garland, Mitchell with DeAndre Hunter and Herb Jones and Mobley at the 5 and just have kind of like this versatile lineup with some big wings and 2 guards. I don't know, man. I think part of me just thinks that Cleveland is a Darius Garland trade away from being closer, though. I just think that a smaller point guard that has been unhealthy, it just really limits you when you can't count on him in the playoffs to stay healthy. And to also, you can't count on him to play defense either. You just can't.
Exponentially, especially next to Donovan Mitchell. I think you and I see eye to eye on that. Do you have anything else on the rest of these teams, or you want to wrap up?
No, I'm all good to go.
All right, so this is coming out on Friday, but I'm still going to say good luck to your Knicks tonight. Usually text you before every game, and I was watching the game with some buddies here, and a couple of them had money on the Pacers in Game 4, and I was adamantly cheering against the Pacers, and that was for you. So I just needed you to know that. But
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time this week. Enjoy these conversations every single week, and good luck to your Knicks tonight. And I'll talk to you next week, brother.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you for having me on.